Tesla has been an undisputed king of electric cars and is probably going to stay this way for a while. However, all the other manufacturers, old and new, are trying to catch up. Today, we're going to talk about the latest attempt by BMW with their all-electric Mini Cooper and see how they did, because this car is in production this year. And of course, we're going to do it with our weekly contributor Tom Moloughney, who's also a contributor to InsideEVs. He had a pretty rare chance to drive one about a week ago. He's going to tell us his impressions, but you know, he's actually a longtime fan of this brand and of this car, so he's got some really good history to talk about. We'll see what his impression is. I'll probably try to jump in as well because I have some strong opinions here, but first let's hear from him. And Tom is joined by a few other new contributors to this channel this year, including Sandy Monroe, the CEO of Fair Future, Karsten Breitfeld, Rich Rebuilds, and a couple of others. So this is an exciting time to tune in for to this channel, and don't forget to subscribe, of course. And if you already have, don't forget to click on the bell notification icon so you don't miss anything moving forward. So, all right, you know, as you know, I root for every single new electric car in the market, but this Mini is something I'm kind of split on, right? And of course, it all comes down to price versus range. That's how it is when it comes to electric cars. So we're gonna hear from Tom about his experience and his opinion. I'm actually quite curious because I think he might have, you know, interesting things to say on both sides. Before that, of course, a quick reminder that this video and this channel is sponsored by Byton. Check out their all-electric SUV called M-Byte and look how fast and easy it is to reserve one. Takes about half a minute of your time. Boom, literally doing it in real time, depending on how fast you can type, and especially because there is no payment form. That's right, the reservations are absolutely free for now. So go to the description of this video and reserve your Byton today. All right, so without further ado, let's bring in Tom and talk about, and by the way, can I just say that this picture was taken by him, and this is by far the best picture that I found out of the all archive on BMW's press site. So, and this is not the first time he takes awesome pictures. So if this whole, you know, electric car journalist thing doesn't work out for him, I think he'll be just fine. All right, Tom, let's hear it. What did you think about your test drive with this new Mini Cooper, all electric new Mini Cooper?
Hey, Alex, thanks for having me on again.
Well, of course.
So yeah, we did the Mini Cooper SE media drive last week down in Miami.
Not a bad place. Not a bad place. Judging by the pictures, I'm very jealous.
Well, I didn't expect BMW or Mini actually to have it in you know, North Dakota or Maine or somewhere where it was going to be 0 degrees. The car out of the box doesn't have a lot of range, so you knew that they were going to hold the media drive in a location that was very range friendly.
All right, fair enough.
You know, to even make it even better, the routes that they had selected for us to drive, as well, you know, maybe some of your followers don't know, when you do the media drives, a whole bunch of journalists pull up. There's a bunch of cars waiting for you, and the manufacturer has the navigation system already programmed along the route that they want you to drive. So you can kind of veer off it a little bit. There's all the cars lined up before we took off. You know, you could veer a little bit off it to take pictures and whatnot, but for the most, you're supposed to stay on that route. So Mini obviously had a route set up that was lower speed driving, kind of street light to street light. What they envision the average Mini Cooper SE owner to be driving in, because they're very clear about it. They call the car an urban car. It's made for, you know, city use. It's not meant, you know, for somebody that lives 50 miles from the nearest shopping center or whatnot. It only has they're estimating 110-mile EPA range. Hasn't been formally announced yet, but if Mini has said that this is what we're expecting, then that's what I expect it to come in at. Now, obviously, on the route that we took, which was all very low speed, street light to street light driving, we were able to do much better than that. And I think we drove 70 miles round trip and had 50 or 60 miles of range left. But that's not really the best indication, because, as I said, we were driving very slowly, street light to street light, rarely going over 30 or 40 miles an hour. And all electric cars do very well in that type of environment. So I'd expect the 110 to 120 miles to be probably what you would expect with this car. So range aside, the car drove pretty well. As you mentioned earlier, I like Mini Coopers. I just think they're fun cars to drive. I like small hatchbacks as like a daily driver, and Minis really provide a fun driving experience. I had the Mini E back in 2009. It was my first electric car. Some of your readers probably remember this. BMW had this pilot program. That's me there with my 2009 fully electric Mini Cooper. It was my first electric car. It's kind of what started me on this path of being a journalist and so forth with electric vehicles. And so what happened was BMW took the Mini Coopers, removed the rear seats, put in a 35 kilowatt hour battery pack. It was the whole back seat was taken up by batteries. And it was kind of this test pilot program. I had it for 2.5 years. And it really is what put me, and said, look, I want to drive electric cars from now on. So now fast forward 11 years later, and we have the new Cooper SE, and it gets the same miles, has about the same size battery pack, actually a little bit smaller. It has a 32.6 kilowatt hour battery pack. The original Mini E had a 35 kilowatt hour battery pack. Like the original Mini E, this isn't a purpose-built electric car. Mini took the existing platform and they kind of fit the batteries in the, say, the transmission tunnel, the tunnel down the center of the vehicle, and then under the rear seat. So it's like a T-shaped battery, similar to how the Chevy Volts battery was. You can see in the picture there, that's 2009 on the right and 2020 on the left. Not a lot of difference.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, Tom. I when you sent me this picture, I was like, "Oh, interesting. They have a kind of a classic version of the new." I did not realize that these cars are 11 years apart, and they have the same pretty much size of battery and same range. But let me jump in a little later about that.
Yeah. So I mean, then obviously the 2020 is much more sophisticated and advanced. It has a thermal management system. Heat pump. It has 2 levels of regenerative braking. It always defaults to strong regenerative braking, which is one pedal driving. It will bring you to a complete stop. But for the customers that don't like that, they can set it to low, so the car coasts a little more. The thing about that is it always defaults back to strong regen. So unless you were going to get in there every time and set it to low, I think that most people are going to just drive in the standard form. The car looks very similar to the other Mini Coopers. The grille is closed in the front. It's kind of a sealed grille, and there's a little bit of badging and some plug emblems, some yellow piping. But other than that, the car looks like any Mini Cooper. There's optional wheels that kind of look like plugs. But like I said, other than that, it looks like a regular Mini Cooper. And Mini did that specifically. They said they don't want it to scream electric. They don't think the majority of their customers don't want to stand out from the rest of the Mini brand. Now, I kind of understand that. I think when I got the first Mini E back in 2009, myself and the others in the program, we all wanted everyone to know we were driving electric cars. This was something new. Almost no one was driving an electric car in 2009. So we wanted it to be like, hey, look, I'm electric. But now mainstream EVs are moving mainstream, and not everyone wants to stand out and scream. Look at like Teslas. People know they're electric just because they know Tesla's design queue and all of their cars are electric. But other than that, they just look like really nice cars. So that's what Mini did with the Mini Cooper. They didn't really throw crazy badging and stuff on it. If you didn't look at it, you really wouldn't know it was electric. You would just think it's a gray Mini Cooper or whatever color. You order it in, and like I said, that was done on purpose. But the cars felt a lot like I felt like I was going back to the future. When I got in the car, It felt like my car from back in 2009. It has great fun driving experience, tons of torque. It's got 181 horsepower, 199 pound-feet of torque. They actually use the motor from the BMW i3S, the sport BMW i3. It gets put in this vehicle. So it has more horsepower and torque than a standard i3. It's smaller, but unfortunately, it weighs more than an i3 because the fact that it is a retrofitted conversion. They had to add additional reinforcements. The front of the car, when you pop the hood, the power electronics are all under there and the electric motor. But Mini had to re-engineer that whole front area, and there's a big, strong frame built around the motor and the power electronics, something that you wouldn't see in the gas version. It was for crash testing and also to protect the whole front during a crash. So I mean, all that adds weight. And I just do I like the car? Yeah, I like it. It was fun to drive. I'll consider getting one, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. But at the same time, 10, 11 years later, Mini could have done better. I wish it was a purpose-designed skateboard type platform. I think it would have gone further. I think it would have just felt better. And they would have had a better utilization of space. But if they did that, if they re-engineered the whole car just to be electric, it would have cost more. And that's where the Cooper SE shines. You can get the base Cooper SE loaded for $29,900. The only thing you choose is the color. It's at the base level is fully featured. There's no options to order. That's the way it comes. It has tons of options already in it. You just choose a color. If you want to get special wheels, you can get special wheels, but everything else is already in it. Now at $29,900, BMW still qualifies for the full federal tax credit. Mini is a BMW brand, so that counts towards the $200,000 with BMW. So Mini doesn't get their own $200,000 vehicles. It gets added in with BMWs, but BMW hasn't even hit $100,000 yet on the tax credit, so they still have a long ways to go. So you get $7,500 if you qualify off for the Mini Cooper SE, brings it down to like $22,000 and change. If you live in a state that has state rebates like California, now all of a sudden it's a $20,000 car.
Or New Jersey, where you live. Congratulations on you guys passing the $5,000 rebate.
Exactly.
Just for Colorado.
Now this wouldn't qualify for the full $5,000 in New Jersey. The way New Jersey works, they did something which was smart. They give $25 credit for every mile of EV range the car gets. So you have to have 200 miles of range to get the full $5,000 rebate. So the Mini E, for instance, gets 110. If it's 110 mile EPA range rated, it gets $25 per mile of range. So it would qualify for $2,600 credit, somewhere around there. But still, you're talking about $20,000 post credits.
All right,
and
so
that's how you make the argument for this car.
Yeah, and so let's talk about that right now. First of all, are we in agreement that the range is extremely disappointing?
No,
we're not. Okay. Why do you think 110 EPA miles, which really translates, as we know, especially in colder states, to something like 70 or 80 miles? Why do you think that is actually acceptable on an all-electric car?
So 80% of Mini owners have 2 or 3 vehicles in the household. Every vehicle in the household doesn't have to go 400 miles. I've been driving i3s since 2014. I just returned my 2018 i3S, right? That was EPA range rated at 112 miles per charge. It did virtually everything I needed it to do. If on certain days I needed to go further, what else do I have in the garage, Alex? A Model 3. And I take that on the long trips. all the cars in our household don't have to go 300 miles. That's why the range doesn't need to be more. If you add more range onto it, the car is going to cost more. I kind of like the fact that Mini focused, number one, on price, and then got the range that they could in that price. Got the range, as much range as they could, without building a custom built platform, and then for under $30,000.
All right. Now, okay. So to me, as somebody who supports the new technology and pushing things forward, 110-mile range is ridiculously low. This is what first generation Nissan Leaf essentially had, realistic range. It's 10 years later. In BMW, this is like the best they can do. I'm not impressed. I'm actually quite disappointed. However, I do see your point. If we're talking about, getting this in the United States or countries that have around $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 in incentives, and you can get this, essentially fully loaded car for $20,000, and let's say we're talking about 80 miles guaranteed range, it might actually serve someone very, very well, because like I have a Chevy Volt that realistic range is 40 miles of electric range, and 95% of the time I don't even bother using gas. The only time I use gas is when I go on long trips, but I'm a single guy, so that's the only car I have. You're right. In a household,
see, you're making the argument you're already making the argument against you. My i3, as I mentioned, has 112-mile range. I live in northern New Jersey. Yeah, it's not Saskatchewan here, but we do get cold winters. And I, at the worst, got 85 miles per charge. Dead of winter, car's cold. So with that, I was able to do anything I needed to do. Plus, Alex, now infrastructure is getting better. There's DC fast chargers out there on the road. There weren't them 10 years ago when I had the original Mini E. There was no DC fast charging. So, but now, you can go a couple hundred miles in a day in a Mini Cooper SE if you need to. You just have to stop at a DC fast charger. Speaking of which, the car charges at 50 kilowatts, which is okay for a 30 kilowatt hour battery. I'm a big, proponent of high speed DC fast charging, as you are. But if you have a small battery, there really isn't much advantage in being able to charge at 150 kilowatts, because it's only going to do it for 2 or 3 minutes and then start ramping down. So the 50 kilowatt charging on the Mini Cooper SE will get you over 80% in a half an hour, which is what, seems to be acceptable for most people. Again, this isn't going to be a car you drive 1,000 miles on a road trip. I mean, you could, but it's not the best car for it. But if you're going somewhere that's 150, 170 miles in a day, and you have to stop once at a DC fast charger, you're not going to mind stopping for half an hour, getting a cup of coffee and coming out and continuing. So I think it works, Alex. I think it's okay that this car only has 110 miles of range. Like I said earlier, every new EV doesn't have to be a long range car. We have people that have such different uses. People that live in the city, they drive all week and they don't drive 100 miles. So I hear you that it's super disappointing when you hear 110 miles on a new car. It's like, really? Like, that's why I said Back to the Future earlier. But then, I look at it on the other token and say, well, they made a car that's affordable, that, someone might be able to lease this thing with $1,000 down for $110 a month. If that's the case, it's going to get people in an electric car that couldn't afford one otherwise.
So my opinion on this is twofold. One is I completely agree with you. If we're talking about $20,000 car that gets you a range that you can drive 99% of the time with no problems, plus the Electrify America and Ionity and so forth, the growing infrastructure, I think it's a great option, right? I mean, first, some people just don't need to drive that far ever, and then when they do, they can get a rental car for long trips, or suffer through going through all of the charging. Number two, you're right. I mean, there are a lot of families have have multiple cars, and this car could be, for someone's kid, for someone who is, someone's a significant other, where they actually use their main car for the long trip. So I think it's a great option. We haven't had an option like this in a while. The only other one is Nissan Leaf, which I think is also a great option.
Mhm.
I hear you, and I think it's a great cheap opportunity for people who are in that particular situation to get an electric car. uh, on the other
It's on my
hand,
list now. It's on my list to replace the i3. I might actually get one if the lease deals are as good as I think they're going to be. I might pick one up for a 24-month lease.
all right. Well, but on my bigger point here, right, is that, it's not like BMW or Mini had all these amazing electric cars, and then they also produced an affordable version with a smaller range. Like, this is all they got right now.
Yeah.
It looks like BMW. I don't like i3 in general, but that's for different reasons. Like, that's aesthetics. And now 10 years later, they're still like, kind of dancing in the same spot. My bigger concern is that they have to get moving. 110-mile range is not exactly moving in the right direction. So my concern is not for this particular car. I think there's a good market for it. I think it has its place and will find its place. However, what is happening with BMW's brand is my bigger concern. Can you talk a little bit about that? Do you have the
Sure.
same concern for them?
Yeah, I absolutely do. If you would have told me 10 years ago when I had my original Mini E that in 2020 BMW wouldn't have an electric car that goes, more than that goes 200 miles per charge, I wouldn't have believed you. Right now the i3 has, I think it's 155 miles of range EPA, and that's their longest range electric car. Now they are coming out with the iX3, perhaps by the end of this year. We don't have an exact date, maybe early 2021. That's supposed to have 200 plus miles of range. But still, I would not have believed you 10 years ago, because it really seemed like BMW was jumping out in front of the legacy OEMs on electrification.
Yeah.
And they were. But as we talked about in a previous video a while back, they got cold feet and they pulled back. And, I think it's going to really hurt them in the long run. We'll have to see. That's an argument for another day. We have to wait a few years to see what happens. They do have a lineup of electric cars in the next 2 or 3 years that are coming out. The iX3, then they have the i4, which that's really supposed to be their Tesla fighter,
Yeah.
the i4. And then they have the iNext, which is an SUV. The iNext is the concept name. We're assuming it's going to be called the iX5 because it looks like an X5 SUV. So, and that's going to be BMW's naming system. They just put an I in front of whatever the vehicle is. If it's an X3, it's electric, it's the iX3. If it's an X5, it's the iX5. So the i4 is like a 4 Series Grand Coupe. So that's really going to be, if any of your followers really want to see if BMW is going to compete in the electric vehicle space, you're going to have to hold on until the i4 comes out, because
Yeah.
that's really, if that comes out and flops, I think the brand's in trouble.
Wow. That's a big statement.
Let's see what happens. That
Now,
we're not going to get that for another 2 years. I think sometime at the end of 2021 ish is when that's supposed to come out. But they're banking on that vehicle being their like showcase electric car. Let's see what happens.
Now let me ask you this. Now that you mentioned that you're actually going to get, or seriously consider the Mini, the only other car that I can compare Mini to with price and range is a Nissan Leaf, right? It starts at the same, about $30,000. It here in the United States, it has the credits still available, and definitely the rebates for the states, so you can get it to a very similar price. But it does go 151 miles versus 110 miles. Tell me why you've never considered Nissan Leaf, though now with a very similar specs, you do consider the new electric Mini.
So the specs aren't what it's all about. As I mentioned earlier, for me, 110 miles is pretty much the same as 150 miles. So I need a car that can go long range like my Model 3, 250 miles or so. And that's my long range car. my second car, 100 miles is fine. It makes no difference to me if it's 100 miles or 150 miles, because basically, if I need to go more than 100 miles or so, I'm probably taking the Model 3. So that doesn't matter. And it's driving characteristics. The Mini is a fun car to drive. The Nissan Leaf, it's a nice electric car. It's kind of like a family hatchback. But there's nothing exciting about the Leaf to me. I think it's a good car. I think it's a good choice for many people. I actually recommend it to a lot of people that ask me for advice. The only thing that I won't recommend it for is if you live in a hot climate area, because Nissan still has not, built and implemented a really good thermal management system. It wouldn't really be a problem for me here in North Jersey. We don't really get too hot for too long. There's a couple months where it's hot, but I think the real problems are if you live in, South Florida, Arizona, Southern California, where it's just warm all the time. That's where you're going to have more problems with the Leaf's thermal management system. So for that reason, I'm not really interested in a Leaf. I think it's a good car for a lot of people. For me, as a daily driver, Alex, I like a small hatchback that's fun to drive, and the Cooper SE it's a blast to drive.
All right, well, fair enough. And I know you were very interested in this car for very. I remember walking around all the car shows, and there were all these amazing cars around, and you're like, hey, where's the Mini? Where's the Mini? So I know you're a fan, and it
was my first electric love. You never forget that.
I know, I totally understand, and I get it. Maybe even a year ago, and even half a year ago, I would not even make this video with you. I would make this video by myself saying, listen, this is an embarrassment to the brand, to the electric car community, and all that stuff. This is why I like having you on the show, because you give me a better perspective. You, I think, give me a wider perspective, and now I'm kind of turning around saying, you know what? Not for me, but it is for a lot of people.
It has its place, Alex.
Yeah, it does.
It has its place. It's not going to appeal to everyone.
Right.
Mini has no grand vision of selling, 20,000 Mini Cooper SEs a month, maybe not even 20,000 a year.
Absolutely.
But it does serve a purpose. I think it's even better in Europe, where there's a lot more small city cars, than the US. So I think it's going to do okay in some of the coastal cities in the US, California, maybe New York City, Boston area, where I live, New Jersey. I think it works there. Everything is kind of close. You don't have to drive miles and miles to get anywhere. There's DC fast infrastructure. So it works in those areas as it will in a lot of European cities. So I think if Mini markets this in the areas where it's going to do well, and that's where they send the bulk of them to the dealers. Like, if there's a Mini dealership, somewhere in Oklahoma, I don't expect them to have 4 Mini Cooper SEs on the lot. It's probably going to be a special order in those areas. But Mini has said it will be available nationwide.
Yeah.
If anybody wants this car, they can get it, but they probably won't stock it in some of the more rural parts of America. And that's understandable.
Fair enough. All right, listen, thanks for coming on and kind of giving a different perspective. I have definitely turned around on this, and I definitely am looking forward to kind of having this car, take its place in this electric car revolution for being a very affordable electric car. So, hey, thanks for hanging out with me once again. I'm looking forward to doing this again next week.
Always thanks to have me. And just so you know, I'm not sure if you're aware, these show up in dealers in like 2 weeks.
Oh.
So it's not coming months from now. It's coming now. So if any of your followers are interested, head over to your Mini dealership now and have a chat about the car.
All right, great. And don't forget to follow Tom, not only on Twitter, which I definitely recommend you follow him. He starts some really interesting stuff in there, but also there's a link in the description of this video for that. But also I linked to his work on InsideEVs. He does have a story written out in details about his test drive, so definitely check it out. Most of his stories are just absolutely awesome, and they're based on his personal experience, so definitely check it out. If you want to follow me in the behind the scenes of my journey, you can check those out on Instagram under E4Electric, and of course don't forget to subscribe to this channel. And if you already have, there's more work to do. Hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss anything moving forward. All right, we are looking forward to your comments. Let us know if you're actually looking to buy one of these. Other than that, see you next time, and remember to stay charged.